Imagine the quiet calm of the ocean, the rhythmic sounds of waves, the peaceful hum of life just below the surface. But what if that tranquility is just a facade? What if the whales are singing less, the coral is turning white, and the sea stars are literally melting? These aren't isolated stories. They're connected in a single, vital narrative that impacts all of us, from the air we breathe to the food we eat. That's what we're talking about today on Environmental with Dandelion.
If this is your first time tuning in, then welcome to Environmental with Dandelion. This is our podcast where we lean into sustainability stories that you might have missed. We're your hosts and the co-founders of Dandelion Branding, Aub and Courtney, and our entire mission is to make noise for purpose-driven brands and to really push sustainability into the mainstream and into more and more conversations. And that's what we do here. Before we jump in, we want to remind you that a lot of the conversations around these topics are devalued by algorithms of the world. And we refuse to censor ourselves or fall prey to the green hush. So we're going to talk about things that are maybe a little censored. And we need your help to make sure that these stories are heard. So please spread your love by liking, subscribing, sharing the podcast with all your friends that also lean a little eco. And now, here's some fast good news.
So let's start with a shout out, because if you have not heard of ClientEarth before today, I'm telling you about them right now, because they're a team of lawyers and policymakers that use the law to literally protect life on Earth. They're amazing. So they expose bills like the new one in Brazil, which is the devastation bill that lets corporations dodge accountability for hurting the rainforest. Bummer. They share new rulings and laws about harmful industries, and they offer people access to fundamental justices as a mission. They are incredible. This is a non-spawn. Just really love them.
Shout out.
Yeah. I'm also a big fan of Inside Climate News and their regular newsletter. And they just sent over an article about how governments could be violating international legal obligations because they're subsidizing fossil fuels and they're issuing new licenses for oil and gas production. And if the governments are breaching those obligations, they could be legally liable and potentially subject to international courts or even other courts that require them to cease climate harming activities or make compensation payments to climate impacted peoples or countries. I think this is really interesting because I think this international court ruling makes it more possible for young people to sue governments over things like subsidizing fossil fuels, which is an incredible precedent. Mm-hmm. So in frustrating, bittersweet, maybe not the best news, but still I think really good, is that the UN plastic talks are still undecided. It can be really frustrating. They've been trying to make a decision around what to do about plastic for 3 years, but it's actually good because people aren't backing down on this fight. They're fighting against virgin plastic production, and the fight here is really between oil versus non-oil states. And that means that people are going up against fossil fuel companies and countries that subsidize them, which is one of the first times we've ever actually seen that over, I guess, the last 100 years. And they're absolutely not budging. So the fight here is that oil states don't want to reduce creation of virgin plastics. They want to subsidize recycling programs, and we all know how well that works, versus actually reducing plastic production on the whole. I'm really glad that I'm not in that room. I would not be able to be quiet. I think you'd be the whole time too.
I would not be able to control my face. Yeah.
No. But I'm really, really glad that people are doing this.
Shout out to them. Thanks for your work.
Yeah. Thank you for what you're doing. That's your good news for today. I know it wasn't like the stuff, but you know what? We're all about the fight this time. We're all about like keeping it real.
Highlight the fight.
Highlight the fight. My next line is highlight the fight.
Catchy. Well, all right. Well, today we're going to talk about some ocean updates.
Yeah, the ocean stuff hit hard in August, which actually makes a lot of sense. I was like, why is there so much ocean stuff coming out? And then I realized it's because it's high summer and the heat waves are wild and the heat waves are having the crazy impact on the oceans. And I thought, is everybody like, is the press just all getting together talking about the ocean? No, it's just hot.
Yeah, or they, took a summer vacation to the ocean and were inspired to be like, oh God, let's look into this.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It just seemed like the ocean slapped hard in August. That's how I was feeling. Like it just like, yeah.
So there's some exciting updates, hey?
Yeah, so I think like maybe this should have been part of our good news, but we really do regular updates on deep sea mining. And in July's sustainability news podcast, we talked about June's UN Ocean Conference. And I was reading my emails and it got really excited because it turns out that that conference led to the Council of the International Seabed Authority delaying their decision to open the ocean to deep sea mining.
Just
so
good. So they're pausing.
That's fantastic. Yeah. They were just like, we're not going to talk about it yet, which means it's like currently not open. So they just pushed the decision forward. It's not even close to being over. Only 38 countries, I think, maybe 39 at this point, have created a moratorium. And some of those are like 20 years, some are 50 years. I think there's only a couple that were like, yeah, we're never deep sea mining. But the flip side of that is that it's very much a fight, a big fight. So I'm just going to say the ISA, the International Seabed Authority, they're delaying making a choice. But there are really big polluters in the world that really want access to the seabeds.
Yeah.
The USA is one of them. And that's actually kind of a big issue because we have a president who just like makes unilateral decisions all the time. And one of them was an executive order to use the Deep Seabed Hard Mineral Resources Act, which hasn't been used since 1984. This fucking old guy and his old guy shit. So they could use that law to bypass the ISA altogether and do deep sea mining in international waters.
Yeah. It's an interesting point we're at where, there are these international organizations that have come up with regulations and legislation around deep sea mining, like fossil fuel usage, carbon emissions, all of that, like in what you had mentioned earlier in the Fast Good News. And yet there are also countries that are just completely like subjugating that, or like almost ignoring the fact that there are international regulations in place. And what's going to play out with that is, who knows, but it is sort of an interesting, it's not the right word, but like there's a push and pull happening here and something is bound to happen.
For sure. I think it's majorly problematic. Like we have these international things, these international bodies to help govern the entire world. And when there are countries that are just like, nope, or leaders that are like, that doesn't apply to me, that sets a precedent, especially when those countries are like China, the US, places in Europe, the really big economies. That sets a horrible precedent for, okay, now we're not going to listen to international law. Not great.
Who's in charge? What are the repercussions?
Who's in charge?
I don't really see an international organization truly hold any particular country accountable. And I want to see that. Yeah. I want to see that play out sometime in my lifetime, sooner than later, ideally.
It would be great. The UN, please, because they have, so the UN, where are you at? What are you doing? Do you see what's happening? Although
pretty busy.
They have a court here in Den Haag
Yes.
And they say things and they make rulings and judgments, but they don't like go after them.
Right.
They just say like, you know, Putin has done war crimes. He's convicted of that. But now he's just like, what happens if he goes to Den Haag? He will be like, you know, brought up on those charges.
Mm-hmm.
But if he just stays in Russia, then there's nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But back to deep sea mining. So this is actually really scary. I think this is one of the scariest things that we've talked about on this podcast, actually, because there is a law that the US can use to do deep sea mining in international waters, not just the coast. If the US starts doing it, guaranteed that other countries will immediately start. It will happen because there's a race for these minerals. In a lot of ways, I think like that's very normal and like political and economical, but it makes my heart pound so hard because the bottom of the ocean is so sensitive. And this is just like, we're gonna mine it, and now we're in a race. We're in a race to the literal fucking bottom. And that is scary. I find that to be terrifying. Mm-hmm. Race to space, fine, get the fuck off the planet. But like, you're gonna ruin our planet if we're racing to the bottom of the ocean.
Right.
For real.
It's such like a brutal and like it's such a mechanical process. It feels like there's got to be a better, more efficient way than just like trawling the bottoms of the oceans and like essentially trapping and hurting everything in its path.
Literally everything in the world.
Yeah.
If you want to know more about deep sea mining, we have talked about that on a past episode, and we will put it in a card. We'll link a card here. So check the top corner. For me, it's always the top right corner, and you can find our episode with Farah, who's the founder of The Ocean and Us, and she gave us a really incredible just sort of download on the impacts, the real impacts of deep sea mining.
Yeah. She was great.
She was awesome. We should have her on again.
Yeah, do a little update. I'd actually be super curious to see kind of what conversations are happening in her world.
Definitely, because she's like part of the, I don't want to say she's part of the ISA now, but they've been like granting memberships. She's the person that's updating all the change.org information. So actually when we're giving these updates, they're coming from Farah. But I would love to hear just from her mouth what's going on.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
In it, definitely.
She's in it, man. So yeah, the impacts of deep sea mining, they, like we were saying, they impact the entire ocean. But that's not the only thing impacting the entire ocean. There's a lot. So let's talk about some of the most recent news. And originally, this first story was going to be part of Fast Good News, but like I said, Ocean News slapped this month, so it became part of this segment because we're moving in the right direction a little bit. It's an update about krill, and which are basically little shrimpy things. They were being essentially overfished, and in like a record unprecedented way, fisheries were shut down to stop overfishing the krill. That's never happened before, especially not before like December. It's August. So they were shut down 4 months early because they're just killing way too many of our little shrimpy friends. And we need those guys because they have a huge impact on the climate. I'm not really sure that's why they shut it down, but I guess they must have, right?
I mean, they're incredibly important to the ecosystem, and was them being affected by the fisheries even like they weren't being killed intentionally?
They were being fished.
They were being fished and used where?
Yeah, so it's a krill fishery in Antarctica.
But they're like the main food source for whales, for a lot of whales.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of marine animals.
Yeah.
all sorts of fishes and whales and birds, and also people are use them. I didn't look up what we use krill for.
Like fish oils, maybe? That's interesting. There's a
Yeah.
market for it, apparently.
There's a market for it, and it led to like crazy overfishing in Antarctica, and the fishery was shut down for it, which is great news. That means that like they can grow for the rest of the year, which is extremely important because they're such an important part of the diet. But not only that, is like they consume algae and phytoplankton. So they take, which the algae and phytoplankton are taking carbon out of the air. Then the krill eats them and they literally shit carbon. Like that's their poop is just carbon, which falls to the bottom of the ocean and acts like an additional carbon storage. So it's not just the fisheries, but heat waves and climate change impacts their early development, especially like in Antarctica where it's getting warmer and they're like used to being like cold and growing underneath ice shelves. But this has a cyclical impact because when there isn't enough krill or the krill is too small, they're not pulling as much carbon out of the environment, which leads to more heat waves and disruptions. When I was reading about this, I was like, whoa, they're superheroes, man. These krill, like, they're so small, but they have such an incredible impact. I had no idea.
Yeah. What a cool like example of how a creature, no matter its size, could have quite possibly one of the largest impacts on the planet as krill. It is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, they're like going around being like, I'm a tiny shrimpy.
They don't know.
And then they have no idea. They have no idea that they're like keeping the world alive.
Straight up, yes. They're just doing their thing. That's just how
they're just doing their thing.
Yeah.
Which is a big part of the whales, which you actually told me about, that the blue whales are singing less.
Yeah, it's something that has been, at least in my feeds, the last, I don't know, couple weeks or so, I've been seeing like research come out about blue whales.
Yeah.
And
there was a study
changes in behavior. Yeah, there were studies that just came out. So blue whales are hunting more and singing less or communicating less, which is something worth observing.
I mean, if you think about it, like it makes a lot of sense. Like if they have to hunt more, because going back to krill, they eat krill and there are less of them. So blue whales have to search for them more. So they have to be quiet. Like, and if they're hunting more, maybe they're smaller, they're more tired, they're less happy. And then they're like,
maybe.
I don't feel like singing.
They might be competing with one another too, almost for the remaining food, that's upsetting the balance here.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting sort of microcosm of like how scarcity affects social dynamics. Yeah. It's all a cycle. It's all connected, right? That like heat waves are affecting krill is affecting whales are a necessary part of the ecosystems within the ocean.
Yeah.
They help to, kind of like krill, right? Replenish oxygen. They're, then kind of creating carbon as well.
Yeah. So I was reading about like the interplay between the krill and the whales. One of the articles I read said that the whale is the perfect regenerative organism. I thought that was so beautiful because it's one of the largest organisms in the world that has ever existed in the planet, but it has very little impact and actually gives back. So they breathe oxygen, obviously, and they replenish the oxygen because their poop is so iron rich that it is one of the few iron sources in the ocean, which feeds the krill and the plankton that gather the carbon, which then the whale eats them. And it's just like this incredible cycle. So actually removing whales from the ocean kills krill, and killing krill kills whales. Like they are absolutely symbiotic. I basically read the whole website of stopkillingwhales.com because I got really, really into this story. I actually highly recommend reading. It's a lot of incredible scientific information and studies. And they said something really beautiful, which is the whales are the fertilizers of the ocean. And because the whales are being killed and phytoplankton is happening a lot less, we are seeing climate change escalating. If the phytoplankton wasn't endangered, we likely wouldn't be facing these serious climate change issues at all. I think that's pretty incredible. It's not helpful information for what we can do because we can't just be like, grow more phytoplankton.
Right.
I guess we actually kind of could. Or
perhaps,
could
but that might have unintended consequences if we don't have enough of, the organisms that are eating it or whatnot. Yeah, there's always a flip side, I suppose, but that is an interesting fact, though.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because oftentimes when you add a predator in, the prey decreases. But when it comes to whales and krill, when you add in more predation, it creates more prey. It's kind of interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So we need more whales.
Need more whales. Need more krill?
Yeah, need more krill, just get more whales. That seems hard, but it's possible if we just stop killing them.
Right. Good first step. Yes. Yeah.
Good first step. I think there's a lot of steps.
There's a lot of steps, but because our next topic is also connected to this, right? Like also connected to these cyclical issues, heat waves, the ocean, record global temperatures. The Great Barrier Reef has suffered the worst annual coral decline in the past 39 years. The coral is being bleached, which is, it's sort of literal, right? It is literally bleaching.
It's literal.
Yeah.
It gets too hot, and then there's algae that lives in there, and it just sort of is like, nope, and it closes it off, and then it's bleached.
Then they turn white, they lose their color, then they just kind of like shrivel and kind of calcify almost. Like it seems like they no longer serve their function at all when they're bleached.
Yeah, but I thought bleached meant dead, but it actually doesn't. They're not dead. They're just like super suffering.
Okay.
They're like, so what gives the corals the color is this like symbiotic algae thing. I didn't know all of this. I just learned it when I was looking at like, why is this scary? For this episode, why is this scary? What's going on? But then I was like, bleached corals aren't dead. They're weaker and more vulnerable to disease. That's a quote from AP News. So there's hope for bleached corals, which is awesome. But yeah, they're just sort of like sitting there like shriveled and suffering and sad, which the human in me is like, that's kind of worse.
Worse than dead is that just being tortured slowly when they're such a valuable part again of the ecosystems like within the ocean, where that is where so much marine life starts.
Yeah.
And thrives.
Like 25% of marine life. They're like the cities of the ocean. I think there's a lot of people out there that feel like whales aren't my business. Krill and phytoplankton, okay, that's far away. It'll be fine. But coral reefs literally impact humans every single day. They are entities of resilience against climate change directly because they're chilling on the edge. They stop storms. They're huge buffers from massive waves. We use coral to like create medications, and we like people go on tourism trips in coral all the time. It's huge business. That shit is going away. So I feel like if you don't feel connected with the whales and the phytoplankton and the krill and the oceans and the deep sea mining, blah, 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 understand that all of those actions are absolutely impacting human cities that live on the coast because they are bleaching coral, which can no longer help us stay resilient against these climate change storms and massive hurricanes that are coming.
Very real. Yeah, right.
Very real.
Yeah. And the increasing temperatures of the waters are not just affecting the animals directly, it's also making the waters more hospitable to pathogens, which is then going to affect these ecosystems down the line, right? Like we're like creating generational issues here.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to include here was an insane fact that 90% of sunflower starfish along the coast of the US, Canada, and Mexico within 5 years are affected by a particular pathogen, which is related to cholera in humans. And it essentially, like, quite possibly one of the most gruesome things I've ever read is that this disease is like twisting and melting the limbs of starfish, essentially like turning them into like goo. And that is just horrendous. So horrendous. So it's like, it's not only just like the current issues, but we're also creating environments in which like things are starting to thrive within our oceans.
This is currently happening.
Mm-hmm.
Currently happening. This is second most scary thing, because if you think COVID is really scary, like this pathogen just exists. There are tons of pathogens that just exist in the world. There are like, you know, in tropical places you can get like flesh-eating viruses, and people who are born and raised in environments with things like flesh-eating viruses, immune systems are a little different, or they have vaccinations for those, or, you know, okay, we're not going to talk about vaccinations. And I'm using that as an example because it happened to my mom, when she was traveling and she like got this crazy virus, but she didn't know how to handle it because it doesn't exist in Michigan. Mm-hmm. So she was going to these doctors, and the doctors were like, I don't know. And then at some point they were like, have you gone south? Like, it took a very long time, and she was in a ton of pain. And this is 100% possible that, just like with COVID, something can jump species. I mean, this one with the starfish is literally just the same genus as cholera, mm-hmm. which killed so many freaking people before we figured out antibiotics.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, these heat waves, they are killing things, and they are making it very challenging for a lot of really important staple species in the world. But they're also causing other new like pathogens and invasive species to take over areas and threaten local ecosystems. Another one is just a brown seaweed that like covered the sand and sea in Algeria this August, and like made it really hard for native people to fish, or them to do sustainable tourism, or even like fish who are used to living in the environment with their native algae left. So now that whole climate, not only is the climate changing, but they're like whole local fisheries and like native species are leaving.
Yep. Affecting the economy, affecting the societies, affecting everything down the line. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it impacts everything. Yeah.
This has been a heavy one. The topics around the ocean are not great news, sadly. Covered a lot of heavy stories today. Starfish, whales, deep sea mining, all of it. But what unites these stories and many of the stories that we cover is the fight. Highlight the fight.
Yeah, highlight the fight. Yes, we have teams of lawyers using the law to hold polluters accountable. We have governments, even if it's just like 38 of them, but they're saying no to deep sea mining, setting a precedent there. And we have people that are refusing to back down in the fight to reduce virgin plastic. And every single one of these stories, it shows that humans are taking action, which is really important. And I think one of those real disasters would be if we stop paying attention.
That's why we're here, telling these stories and making sure that you don't miss it. There's a lot happening in the world. There's a lot to pay attention to. All of it is overwhelming. That is a strategy, and it's something that you've got to fight against. You got to stay aware. Your awareness, your voice, your support for these organizations is so, so, so important and necessary. so that they can continue to do the work and be a part of the solution. And you can be a part of that solution as well.
Thank you so much for tuning in here. Don't forget to check out our show notes for our resources and share this episode with your eco-curious friends. And we will see you next time.